Okay, so training is going to continue with the inventory module. As with every one of our modules, we have a maintain file section. So the first thing we do when you set up your system is you must set up your system options. In the inventory system options module, you have two tabs. The first tab controls the general information about the software. For instance, what period you're in, what your year end is, how many years you're going to retain your information. One thing you want to watch for is down here where it says include quantity on PO in the quantity available. This will, when you look up whether or not an item can be shipped or not, if you say yes to this question or check mark it, it will automatically take into consideration those quantities. Most people don't use that. Below that you see commission by product line. If you have your system set up to where you pay, let's say you have earns, and you pay 10% commission on earns and you pay 5% commission on things like flower pots. You can set those two different product lines up with their own commission rate, and anything that falls within that category will get that rate. Then over here where you have your image control, image controlling or image importing depends on how you want to do it. If you want to attach the image to your items within the software, you would use the first two options. If you want to link to an individual file, then you would use this version 9, and you'd have to check the box underneath which says add images to or outside of the item entry system, and you would then identify the path that you can find the images in. I personally like to always have a subdirectory within the inventory module called images because it makes it easier for me to program quotes and packing lists and invoices with the image on it. If you're using UPCs, you would put your next available UPC number here, and the system would then automatically increment from there. The user-defined, it doesn't, the user-defined tab allows you to define up to 20 fields of your own choosing, and the last 4 being strictly item numeric. Any questions on item entry system options? If not, we'll continue. By clicking on that tab, you'll see a series of 20 fields. As I said earlier, the last 4 fields are numeric, and by typing in the white box, you can actually label these any way you want. Okay, so that'll conclude that section. Next thing we're going to go into is item entry. Again, remember that our screens are multi-dimensional, which means that they are used for multiple function. You would not only add items here, but you would also modify and delete items here if you prefer to do that. So when you bring up an item, it's going to automatically show me the item number. You would fill in the item number, fill in a description here, and if you're using a UPC generator, as I said, you would click UPC button and it'll automatically calculate the next UPC number. Always assign products to a product line. By assigning an item to a product line, it will tell the system how to distribute the general ledger function. On tab 1 of the product line, you have whether or not it's a finished good, a raw material, a bill of material, or a subassembly. We're going to get into bill of material in a few minutes. You all have your costing method. The system has the ability to cost by standard cost, average cost, FIFO, which is first in, first out, LIFO, which is last in, first out, lot costing, and serial costing. Lot costing means that you went out and you bought this huge closeout, for instance. You paid $500 and you got 300 items. You don't want to enter each individual item. You want to just put in a whole lot. Say, I got 500 pieces, I paid $300, and I'm going to sell each item for $2 each. This will control that. Serialized costing is where you buy items that are serialized. For instance, you sell computers. you need to control in your inventory that you have 27 monitors. Each monitor would have its own serial number, and as you sell it, you would reduce it by that item, exact item with that serial number. Commission is set here by either being not commissionable, percent of gross price, percent of cost, or percent of gross profit. The common method is percent of gross price. You have a couple of check boxes here. One is the back order. If you do not check back order, this item will never be back ordered. In other words, if you don't have enough in stock, it won't, not only will it not ship it, but it also will not back order it. Taxable is if you sell retail, this will also allow the calculation of a tax on the item. So for instance, if you sell food items and hard goods, food items in some states are not taxable, so those items would be marked as not taxable. In other words, you would not check mark the box taxable. Drop ship. Now that's a screwy word in our system, and that means that merchandise comes directly from your vendor and goes directly to your customer. Be very careful with this. The most common mistake people make in our system is they mark their items drop shippable thinking that they drop ship to the customer. Well, if you mark it as a drop ship item, it will not reduce inventory. So be careful of that. Multi-bin is only used in our warehouse system for scanning. It allows you to control quantities in multiple bin locations so that when you stock the shelves, you know how many pieces you put in a particular bin, and when you pull the merchandise off, how many you pulled out of that particular bin. Unit of measures are, if you buy things, for instance, as one unit, but there's 12 pieces, and when you get it here in your warehouse, you want to separate it into the 12 pieces, you would put that the unit of measure for purchasing is a dozen, and the factor is 1, and the sale unit measure is each, and the factor is 12. Okay? The General Ledger tab identifies which General Ledger accounts will get hit each time you sell an item, bring in an item, etc. Okay, that concludes our tab 1 item entry. I'm sorry, it does not. It tells us how that explains the product lines. Warehouse, the system has the ability to do multiple warehousing. So if you have multiple warehouses, you can identify where the default for this particular item is. A lot of times, if you sell to a major department store, for instance, you want to earmark that merchandise for that department store. So a lot of my clients set up a separate warehouse called direct to customer or mass market, and when merchandise comes in, they actually move the merchandise from the general warehouse cyber method way into the alternate warehouses. Costing method is we've already covered. Your retail price would go here. Your standard cost would go here. This would be a generalized bin location. Inventory cycle is when you do physical counts, you can actually break your warehouse down into quadrants and say, okay, this is quadrant A, and we're going to count everything that's in quadrant A. Or we're going to calculate everything that's in quadrant B. And when doing a physical inventory sheet, you would identify which quadrant you want to use. Most people don't use this because they store things all over the warehouse. Let's see here. Standard cost is here. Last cost is automatically calculated, updated once you receive merchandise in. If you're going to close an item out, for instance, you may want to change the commission rate for that particular item. So let's say, for instance, you have a sales rep that gets normally 15%, but they're selling a closeout item and you're only going to get 5% on that one item. You would fill in the 5% here, and it would automatically override it on the sales order. Alternate item. Let's say you are out of stock of an item and you want the system to automatically recommend something else. If you choose alternate item, a table will open up here that allows you to build a cross-reference to say, if I have this item is similar, so please test it. And that shows up during sales order entry. Okay, let's see here. Again, we have our dropship discount. If an item is discountable, you must mark it discountable here. And when you discontinue an item, you would click it here. This would prevent you from entering orders or purchase orders for that particular item. Any questions? Great. Okay, our next tab is our warehouse tab. It's on this tab that you can see how many pieces you have in stock, how many pieces are on open sales order, how many are on an open purchase order, on the water, and this means where it says WO is if you're a manufacturer, this is how many work orders you have outstanding for it. Each one of these columns has a drill down, so you could actually drill in if there were numbers here. Images and notes is where you would actually have image. You can see we have a little image here where it actually shows me where the goods are. Okay, the notes field is an extended description field. You can put as much as you want in here so that your customer service people can upsell. Vendors, you can have as many vendors for an item as you'd like and identify which one is the primary vendor. What your last cost is and when you last purchased it will automatically be updated every time you receive a purchase order. Your pricing tab allows you to set up special price tables for each item. Your miscellaneous tab is used for it controls all of your landed cost information. It also allows you to maintain how many pieces per box are in a carton, what your duty rate is, and right here you have DIM in inches, the dimension, that's your weight, your width, your depth, and your height, as well as in metric, which is also your width, depth, and height. In Palm Minimum, if you're using the scanners, this would identify how many minimum pieces a customer has to buy. So if they have to buy a minimum of 3, but they can buy 4, the minimum would be 3 and the multiple would be 1. But if they have to buy in increments of 3, the minimum would be 3 and the multiple would be 3. If you pay a royalty, you would fill in the author's code here and the % that you have to pay. The internal memo is used for production notes. You can put your entire production specs right here and those will print on your purchase order. EDI is, of course, if you're doing EDI, this allows you to fill in the fields necessary, the information necessary to upload your catalog to Innovus. And here's where your fields would show up. Any questions on item entry? No? Okay, well that concludes our lesson on the inventory. I'm sorry, we forgot to do bill of materials. Bill of materials is where you would control where you set up assortments or pre-packs, as well as if you're a manufacturer. You would basically build a recipe for the item, and once you built the recipe, and I'll go in here and open one up, we have one here, you would fill in how many pieces that pre-pack takes. You would also identify if you want the system to ask you every time you enter an order whether or not you want to build it. And you would also identify what pricing you want to use. If you choose component pricing, it'll actually go out to the individual items and use that pricing. But let's say, for instance, if the customer buys this pre-pack, they're really going to get a discount. You can put in a discount you can put a price in for the package and choose to use the kit pricing, and it would then not list the component pricing. Okay? And that pretty much concludes maintain files.